Have you bought this crochet kit from KMART? Are you completely confused by the instructions? If so, you're not alone. Throw the instructions away and keep watching this tutorial. Recently, I reviewed this mini crochet kit from KMART, and something that became very clear from doing that review is that the instructions are not at all beginner friendly. As an experienced crocheter, I could follow most of the pattern, but it's not written in a standard format. A lot of important information is skipped, and the instructions for how to do each of the required stitches is completely nonsensical. Someone commented on that review video saying that they wished that there was a tutorial, so I thought I'd make one. In this tutorial, I'll broadly follow the pattern that comes with the kit, but I have made a few adjustments and improvements throughout where the pattern doesn't make sense. I've designed this tutorial for beginners, but I do assume that you know how to do a slip knot, a starting chain, and a single crochet. If this is literally the first time that you've picked up a crochet hook and none of the things that I've just mentioned make sense, then have a look in the description where I've included some links to some beginner tutorials. Go check those out and then come back here. Otherwise, I'll explain everything that you need to be able to make this pattern, including how to do a magic circle, a slip stitch border, increases, decreases, and how to embroider the face. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so these are all the materials that you get inside the kit, which includes everything that you need to make the pea pod. So the important thing to note about the hook that's included in the kit is that it's not actually the size that it says it is. So this hook says it's a 4mm on this end and a 3mm in this end, but if we check it here, you'll see that it's much narrower than a 4mm and a 3mm. By my calculation, the 4mm end is actually the size of a 3mm hook, maybe a little bit narrower, and the 3mm end is actually about a 2.5. So keep that in mind if you plan to use this crochet hook again, that actually what you've got is a 2.5mm and a 3mm hook. If you try and use this for a pattern that calls for a 4 or a 3mm hook, your gauge will be way off. So when I did the review of this kit, I used the larger end. However, I ran out of the yellow yarn when I was working on my second pea seed. So I'm going to size down for this tutorial. So if you're using the crochet hook in the kit, use the smaller end, the end that says 3mm. I'd also suggest putting a little piece of colored tape on this end, or otherwise writing down which end of the hook that you are using, as it can be quite easy to put this down, pick it up, and accidentally start crocheting with the other end. I'm not actually going to use this hook for the tutorial because it's not the most comfortable or best quality hook. So I'm going to use my own crochet hook. This is my Clover Amour, and I'll be using a 2.5mm hook. So if you want to use your own hook, this is the size you want to use, 2.5. Okay, so we'll start with the pea pod. So grab your green yarn. Then you just want to make a slip knot. And we want a starting chain of 27 chains. Here's our starting chain of 27. Now we want to work into the second chain from your hook. So this is the first chain here, so we want to work into the second chain here. But we're going to work into the back bumps of the chain. So this is the top of the chain here, where you can see the kind of V shape. If you flip your chain over, you can see these little bumps across the back. These are the bumps that you want to work into. Okay, so ignore this first bump, and then we want to put our hook under the second bump here. And now we do a single crochet. Okay, so since this is our first stitch, we'll use our stitch marker to note this is our first stitch. Now we're doing an increase, so that means we're doing 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So I'm going to go into the same gap here do another single crochet. Okay, now we're going to do 24 single crochets, working into each of these back bumps all the way across the starting chain. Now, working into the back bumps can be a little bit trickier than how you would typically work into a starting chain. If you're finding it really hard to get your hook under the bump, it might be because your starting chain tension is too tight, in which case you might want to try doing the chain again with a larger size hook. So if you're using the included hook, you could use the other end, and then just make sure you switch back to the smaller hook for your first row. Okay, so now I have 26 stitches, my initial increase of 2 stitches, and then 24 single crochets. And into this very last chain, I will do 4 single crochets, and that's going to create the curve or the corner of our pea pod. So that's my first single crochet. Now I'll do 3 more into the same stitch. Okay, now we're going to work into the other side of the chain. So basically we're going to keep going, but this time along the side of the chain that has the little V stitches. And we do 24 single crochets across this back side. So when you're working into this side of the chain stitch, you'll insert your hook under both prongs of the V and then single crochet. Okay, and once we've done 24 single crochets across, our very last stitch is going to be an increase. So I'm going to work 2 single crochets into this last stitch. Okay, so that's the first row. So I should now have 56 stitches, which go all the way around that initial chain stitch. Okay, so row number 2 is 56 single crochets, again all the way around. And then don't forget to move your stitch marker so you know which is the first stitch of the row. So this is now my first stitch of row 2. And then I'll just keep doing single crochets all the way around. So when you get to the end here, just keep going all the way around until you're back at the stitch marker. Okay, that's the end of row 2. So it's always good at this point to just double check you've got the right number of stitches, so you should still have 56 stitches all the way around. Then rows 3, 4 and 5 are all just 56 single crochets, just exactly like row 2. So just repeat what you did for row 2 for rows 3, 4 and 5, and once you get up to row 6, I'll meet you back here. Okay, so I've just finished row 5 and I'm about to start row 6. Now row 6 starts with a decrease, and I'll show you how to do an invisible decrease because it gives a much cleaner finish than a standard decrease. So how we do an invisible decrease. You want to put your crochet hook under just the first loop of the first stitch. So instead of going under both of the prongs of the V like you typically would, you only want to go under this first one. Then you want to loop your hook around and do the same thing with a second stitch. So now you've got 3 loops on your hook. So again, you're just going through that front prong, not both prongs of the V. You want to yarn over, pull through the first 2 loops, and then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And that's how you do an invisible decrease. Now make sure you put your stitch marker back into that first stitch. And now we want to do 24 single crochets down to the other end of the pea pod. Now I want to do 2 decreases in a row. So again, to do an invisible decrease, go under the first prong of the V of your first stitch, and then under the second prong in the second stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, and now we're going to do that a second time. So under the first loop of the V, and under the first loop of the second stitch, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2. That's our 2 decreases. And now we'll do another 24 single crochets. Okay, so that's 24 single crochets, and now I want to do 1 more decrease as my final stitch. And that's the end of row 6. And so by the end of row 6, you should have 52 stitches all the way around. For rows 7 through to 10, you want to do 52 single crochet stitches. So I'll meet you back here once you're at row 11. Okay, I've just finished row 10. For row 11, we're going to do 52 slip stitches. Okay, so I'll briefly explain how to do a slip stitch, mainly because the instructions in the pattern are very confusing. So to do a slip stitch, you just put your hook into the stitch like you would for a single crochet and pull up a loop. But instead of yarning over, you hook this first loop on the head of your hook and pull it through the other loop. So now I will take my stitch marker and mark the first and mark that stitch because it's the first stitch in row 11. And so again, to do a slip stitch, we go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through a loop, and then pull through the loop on your hook. Yarn over, pull up a loop. So just do that all the way around, 52 times in total. Okay, so that's my last stitch of row 11. So now we can finalize the peapod. So to fasten off, you just pull this tail through, all the way through, and pull it tight, and that'll create a knot that will keep your work secure. Okay, and our little peapod is finished, or almost finished. So one thing I do want to note here, because this can be confusing for new beginners, is the difference between the right side and the wrong side of your work. So depending on how your work curled as you're working with it, it might be this side through or this side. The way to tell which way is the right side is if you look at this side here, you'll see it just looks a little bit messier, it's a little bit matte. Also here you'll kind of see where we've done our invisible decreases, there's kind of a really visible line. Whereas on the right side of the work, a little bit shinier, a little bit neater, and there's no visible line where we did our invisible decreases. So the final thing we need to do is to weave in these ends. Now the kit comes with a little tapestry needle. However, if you have your own tapestry needle, I definitely recommend using that. This needle has a really wide head, which makes it easy to thread the yarn onto the needle, but it makes it really hard to pull through your stitches. So I'm going to use my metal tapestry needle instead. So weaving in your ends. Turn your work inside out. We'll start with this end here. Thread the yarn onto your needle, and then we just want to sew this end through our stitches, and we want to work in at least 3 different directions. So if we go under these 2, through here. Be careful not to pull it too tight so it doesn't pucker your work. And the purpose of weaving in your ends like this is just to ensure that your work doesn't come undone. Then once we've done that, just take some embroidery scissors or normal scissors and just cut really close to your work. Now we can turn our work back through, and you can't really tell where I've stitched that end into. So just do the same thing with this end as well. You probably want to cut it so it's a little bit more of a manageable size. And there we have it, our little pea pod. Okay, now for the pea seed. So to start the pea seed, we're going to do a magic loop. Magic loop can be quite tricky, and there are lots of different techniques for how to do it. So if the way that I do it doesn't make sense to you, have a look on YouTube and you'll find a bunch of other tutorials for different approaches. But the way that I do it is just to hold the tail of the yarn between my thumb and first finger, and then wrap the yarn around these front two fingers, back underneath, and then cross over the top. So then I have a little cross on my fingers here. Then take your hook, go under this first thread, hook the second thread and pull it down and over top. Then we just want to do a crochet into that loop. So go under the loop, hook your yarn, and single crochet. And there's your magic loop. And the way that you can tell if it's worked correctly or not is if you pull the tail, the loop should get smaller. So I'll show you that one more time. Over and cross. Under the first one, pull through the second, twist and over. Then insert your hook into the circle, yarn over, and pull through. Okay, once you've made your magic loop, we now want to do 6 single crochets into the magic loop. So to work into the magic loop, instead of inserting your hook into the stitch, you just insert it into the middle of the circle. Into the circle, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. Now since this is our first stitch, let's put the stitch marker in. So again, into the circle, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through both loops. Okay, so that's 6 single crochets. Then to close the loop, we just pull on the tail here, and you'll get something that looks like this. If you can't pull through the tail, then there might have been an issue with your magic loop. Okay, so for round 2, we're going to do 6 increases. So that means we're going to do 2 single crochet stitches into each of these 6 stitches. So by the end of the round, we'll have 12 stitches. So this is our first stitch, so we'll put our stitch marker in. And now we're going to do a second single crochet into that same space. And we'll repeat that all the way around. end of row 2, we now have 12 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. For row 3, we're going to do a single crochet, then an increase, and we'll repeat that 6 times. So that's our first single crochet. Put the stitch marker in to mark the first stitch of the row. Then for our next stitch, we'll do an increase. So that's 2 single crochets in the second stitch. Then a single crochet, followed by another increase. And we'll just keep repeating that around. So for row 4, we're going to do a single crochet, an increase, single crochet, and then we'll repeat that 6 times. So I did a single crochet, then an increase, then a single crochet again in the third stitch. Then for the fourth stitch, we do another single crochet, and then an increase. Single crochet, single crochet, increase. We just keep repeating that around. So at this point you should have 24 stitches. Then for row 5, we're just going to do 24 single crochets all the way around. So for rows 6, 7, 8 and 9, we're just going to repeat that. So 24 single crochets all the way around. So I'll meet you back here when you're up to row 10. Okay, so I've just finished row 9. Now this is a good point to embroider the face. So just to make sure our work doesn't unravel, just pull a big loop and then put your stitch marker through that loop, and that'll just make sure your work's not going anywhere. Okay, so to embroider the face, you want to take the black yarn that's included in the kit and a tapestry needle. The needle that's included is pretty terrible, so I'm going to use my own metal tapestry needle. Now, because we need to embroider 2 faces, I'm just going to chop this yarn in half so I don't accidentally use too much on the first face. Okay, so one option is just to thread a single piece of yarn and tie a knot in the end of it. If you do that, you just want to make sure your knot is big enough that it won't come through any of the gaps in your work. But I'll show you another technique that avoids needing to have an initial knot. This yarn is very splitty, which makes it a little bit tricky to embroider with. Let's just cut off the end. Okay, so you want to fold your yarn in half so it's kind of got a loop at one end, and then the end where your 2 threads are, you want to thread both of those threads through the needle. So now on my needle I have a loop on one end and then 2 spare pieces on the other end. So you can kind of place the face wherever you like really, but I would suggest doing the eyes about 1, 2, 3 rows up. So you just want to come in through the back. Just be careful not to pull it all the way through. Now we want to go straight down for the eye, which might mean you're kind of going on a little bit of an angle, and I'd suggest going 1 stitch down. So we just insert our needle. Then if we turn around, what we want to do is pull the needle through this loop that we had at the start. And that creates a nice little knot there, so your work won't go anywhere. Oh, so there's our first eye. Okay, now for our second eye, we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches across on the same row. Pull that through. Just be careful not to pull too tight because it will pull your black yarn into the yellow yarn. It'll be a bit harder to see. Again, go straight down. And there's your second eye. Now for the smile. Then we want to come down on an angle about 2 stitches, so you're sort of in the middle here. Again, being careful not to pull it too tight. And then just down into the same point here. And there's a little face. So to fasten it off at the end, I like to just go under one of my other stitches like so, and then just put the needle back through the loop that you just created. Again, that'll create a nice knot, and then just to be extra secure, I'll knot these 2 together. You can chop off these black threads if you want to, but you can actually just leave them in there because we're going to stuff the pea with polyfill anyway. Now on the photograph on the front of the kit, the pea pods have little rosy cheeks, and I'll show you how to do that at the end. Okay, now for row 10. So for row 10 we're going to do a single crochet, a decrease, then a single crochet. So our next stitch is a decrease. So again, a quick reminder how to do an invisible decrease. Hook under the first prong of your first stitch and also under the first prong of your second stitch. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And then we follow that with a single crochet, and then we repeat that 6 times. So another single crochet, decrease, single crochet. Then for row 11, we will do a single crochet and a decrease, single crochet, decrease. We do that 6 times in total. Okay, so now we want to stuff our pea pod. And now for the final row, we're just going to do 6 decreases. Okay, so to fasten the pea pod off, we just give ourselves a bit of a yarn end for weaving in. Then we just want to pull our yarn all the way through and pull tight. Then to weave in this tail, we just thread yarn tail through our tapestry needle. Then we just kind of work in and through stitches just to pull that tight. And there's our first pea seed. So we just repeat that process for the second pea seed exactly the same. So with the second one, I actually did a single strand for the mouth, so I still doubled up for the eyes, and I think actually it gives a slightly cleaner smile than the two strand one that I did originally. We pop our peas into our pea pod. So now for the final details. The instructions in the kit for how to do the bow I could not follow at all, so I'll show you how I would typically do a bow for amigurumi. Okay, the smile was bothering me, so I've changed the second little pea pod to have a single strand smile as well. Okay, so to do the bow, we're just going to do a slip knot. And we're going to do 6 chains. Okay, now we're going to work into the second chain from the hook and single crochet across. So you now have 7 stitches. Then chain 1 and turn. This turning chain does not count as a stitch. So our first stitch of the next row goes into this stitch here. Again, we're going to chain 1, turn, and single crochet across. And we're going to repeat that for 2 more rows. Okay, so once we've done 4 rows, we'll have this nice little square here. Now you just want to cut, actually we don't want to cut, we want to leave a long tail here. So you just pull up a loop and pull through the yarn just to fasten off. Then take your tapestry needle, thread that on. Now what we want to do is basically weave through our stitches until we're in about the middle of the rectangle. Okay, so once our thread is in the middle, we want to squidge our bow, the center of our bow together, and then just wrap this tail out of the way. Wrap our yarn around the center. Pull it nice and tight. And then to secure it, we just want to hook under here and through this loop to create a nice little knot. And there's our little bow. So to attach it to the pea pod, we can basically just sew it straight on. And then with this end here, you can either weave it into the bow or use it to secure the bow further down to the pea head, which is what I will do. There we go. Now on the packet, you'll see that the pea pods have kind of rosy cheeks, and the way that they do this is actually just with blush. So I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so just take your blush. Cream blush is better, but powder blush works fine as well, and you want it fairly stiff. And then we just brush it on. And there we go, our finished pea pod. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you liked the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more info and inspo for crochet makers. If you've tried any of the other KMART kits and have found the instructions impenetrable and you'd like me to do a tutorial on it, let me know in the comments. Thanks for crocheting with me and happy crafting.